It was unreal. It was just unreal. But I remember...
The chemistry between Ann-Margret and Elvis was real, raw, and far too dangerous for the cameras back then. They moved like fire and sparks. But their hot dancing scene, captured on film, went unnoticed for years. Now that hidden moment has been exposed, and it's more daring than anyone could believe. This wasn't just acting. It was something else entirely. What went on behind the scenes, and what does it reveal about their secret bond? Join us as we unravel the mystery behind their love story and how it turned out. The first spark. Elvis Presley had many women around him during his life, but not many of them left the kind of mark that Ann-Margret did. She brought something special with her wherever she went. She could sing with power, dance with energy, and grab attention without even trying. But there was more to her than just that. She had a soft side, too. She enjoyed staying close to family, laughing at jokes, and making others laugh as well. She never acted like she was better than anyone else. And she rode bikes, something that really impressed Elvis. It was easy to see why he fell for her. Their paths crossed for the first time in early July of 1963. Elvis was already 28 years old, and Ann-Margret was 22. Both were riding high in their careers. She had just made a big name for herself with the musical Bye Bye Birdie, which was loosely based on Elvis joining the army. That film had pushed her into the spotlight. She was already becoming known as a star with her own power, not just someone riding on someone else's popularity. Just a few months earlier, she had sung at what became the last birthday party for President John F. Kennedy. The year before, Marilyn Monroe had done the same, which showed just how much attention Ann-Margret was getting. She sang at the official party and later at the more private one that followed. Her fame was growing fast, and people were starting to take notice. The meeting between her and Elvis wasn't by accident. The studio's publicity team had arranged it carefully. The director of Viva Las Vegas, George Sidney, was the one who introduced them. He was quite fond of Ann-Margret himself and wanted everything to go smoothly. When the two stars met, they looked sharp. Elvis wore a suit and tie, and Ann-Margret showed up in a stylish white turtleneck with her hair pinned up. They shook hands, spoke a few polite words, and posed for a few pictures. That was it for that day. On the surface, it all seemed formal and simple. But something had started to grow between them, even if no one could see it at first. That spark became clearer when they met again just days later, on July 11. This time it wasn't about posing for cameras. They had to work together. The place was Radio Recorder's studio in Los Angeles. Elvis had already recorded several songs for the film. Now it was time to do two duets with Ann-Margret, The Lady Loves Me and You're the Boss. The energy between them was easy to spot. They clicked right away. They laughed, they worked, and they played off each other's moods without needing to try too hard. It felt like they already knew each other, even though they had just met. They shared the same energy. People who were watching them could see it. They both lit up in each other's presence. One of Elvis's close friends, Joe Esposito, once pointed out something. Ann-Margret was like the female version of Elvis. That thought stuck with a lot of people because it felt true. Their personalities matched. Their backgrounds were similar. Both of them came from regular families, and neither one had started out with much. They both found it hard to open up to strangers. Sometimes they pulled back, but on stage, everything changed. Music turned them into something else. That was where they felt alive. That was where they gave everything. Filming for Viva Las Vegas began on July 15 in Las Vegas. Elvis and his team took over the 28th floor of the Sahara Hotel, with Elvis staying in the presidential suite. Ann-Margret stayed a few floors below, but that distance didn't last long. Before anyone knew it, she was spending more and more time in Elvis's suite. Sometimes they stayed in all weekend. Other times they went out on their own, just the two of them, leaving Elvis's usual group behind. That wasn't like him. His friends were surprised, but they didn't complain. They liked Ann-Margret. She was honest, direct, and confident, and she looked stunning all the time. Some of the guys from Elvis's close circle even found themselves taken with her. They knew nothing would come of it, of course. Elvis had fallen hard, and when he did, things could get serious fast. He didn't hold back when he felt strongly about someone. You had to be careful not to cross the line, but they all got along. Even when they joked around, it never turned ugly. One time, Ann-Margret showed up in a very bold outfit, and one of the guys, Alan Fortis, couldn't help himself. He made a cheeky comment and asked her if she would run around the block 4 times and then lend him her pants. For a moment, everything stopped. No one knew how Elvis would take it. Then, laughter filled the room. Both Elvis and Ann-Margret burst out laughing. Those early weeks of working together brought them close fast. They laughed, they worked, they shared the same rhythm. They stayed up late, loved music, and made the most of every moment. It wasn't just an ordinary working relationship. Something deeper had started to build between them, and those who were around them knew they were watching something different unfold. However, it wasn't long before it played out before their very eyes. A chemistry of energy.
It was extremely special. It was very strong.
Strong in the what?
Our relationship was very strong and very serious.
When Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret began working together on Viva Las Vegas, something intense and unforgettable started to build between them. Their connection showed clearly in their rehearsals. These weren't just normal practice sessions. They turned into long, sweaty hours where both stars pushed themselves beyond their limits. They worked hard to get every move right. The scenes that came from these rehearsals still hold power decades later. Behind the scenes, only a few photos remain to show what went on. In those rare pictures, Elvis and Ann-Margret often appear in simple clothes, focused only on their steps. Their faces shine with effort. Each was trying to match the other, not just in rhythm but in energy and passion. They didn't just go through the moves, they poured themselves into each second. The man in charge of shaping these dances was David Winters. His role in the film was important because he brought strong ideas to the table. But it wasn't just that. He already understood Ann-Margret deeply. He had taught her in the past. That gave him a strong advantage. He already knew how far she could go, how much strength she held in her movements, and how to draw that power out of her. She believed in him and made sure he got the role of choreographer. For David Winters, this job opened new doors. Viva Las Vegas became his first major film project, and he used it to show what he could do. He didn't work alone either. He got help from Toni Basil, who was also full of talent and energy. She worked closely with both stars during rehearsals. She also appeared in the movie as one of the dancers, the girl in the red dress during the pool scene that caught everyone's eye. Toni Basil brought her own ideas and helped break down the routines. She had Elvis and Ann-Margret learn their moves separately. This step was important. It helped each of them focus and build strength in their own way. Elvis brought sharp movements filled with power. Ann-Margret worked on her technique with fast steps and wide energy. They built up their parts little by little until both felt ready. When the time came to bring them together, the result took everyone by surprise. From the very first moment they danced side by side, something changed in the air. Everyone could feel it. Their movements matched almost too well. The steps were right, the timing perfect, but the energy between them made the whole room stop. What they shared could not be planned or forced. It just happened. Their connection showed on screen in every single scene they shared. The fire, the rhythm, and the chemistry made the dances feel real. They didn't just copy each other's moves, they became one in the moment. At times, they seemed to respond to each other without needing to speak. They moved like reflections. When one pushed forward, the other answered with the same strength. It didn't feel like acting. It felt like something honest that came from deep inside both of them. Watching those scenes now, especially during the "Come On Everybody" number, the power still jumps from the screen. They don't look like two stars showing off. They look like a single force, bold and fearless, yet each holding on to their unique style. Their bodies speak through motion, creating something that still holds meaning long after the cameras stopped rolling. What happened during those rehearsals wasn't just the result of hard work. It wasn't only about skill or experience. It came from something personal. Ann-Margret's talent had already been clear before this film. People had seen her dance and perform with strength and confidence. But standing next to Elvis, something in her lifted even higher. She pushed herself to move with more fire, more force, more life. At times, her steps looked wild, almost like she was letting go of everything, but she never lost control. Her sharpness, her timing, and her boldness never failed. Elvis, on the other hand, didn't just match her. He met her with equal power. He didn't try to lead or take over. He moved with her, step for step, beat for beat. The feelings that passed between Elvis and Ann-Margret gave shape to every movement they made. They danced with full hearts, feeding off each other's energy, letting it carry them forward. That made their dances feel balanced and alive. They shared space without pulling attention from each other. Each pushed the other to reach new levels. Looking back, it's clear that what they created couldn't be copied. It wasn't just about dancing well or following the beat. It was about finding something rare and letting it grow naturally. Elvis and Ann-Margret didn't just act like dance partners. They became connected in a way that shaped every scene they shared. The work they did on Viva Las Vegas continues to stand out, not only because of the film's songs and story, but also because of the energy the two stars brought to every frame. The passion they shared never faded. It built the kind of magic that doesn't come around often. When they danced, they didn't hold anything back. They let it all out and brought something unusual to life. Head to head, tensions explode. When Ann-Margret stepped onto the set of Viva Las Vegas, everything around her seemed to fall away. She danced with so much energy and freedom that it didn't look like she was performing at all. It was as if she wasn't thinking about the cameras or the people watching. She simply gave herself over to the music. But behind this carefree energy was a woman who had complete control over her movements. She knew what she was doing, and she did it in a way that made it impossible to look away. George Sidney, the film's director, noticed this straight away. He didn't just see an actress doing her job. He saw a star who could light up the screen without even trying. On set, he paid close attention to Ann-Margret's every move. He filmed her from every angle. He asked for extra takes, trying to capture every moment in her performance. Each turn, each step, each glance. Her dancing had both skill and wild excitement. As Sidney focused more on her, some people noticed that Elvis Presley was not getting as much screen time. He was still the lead, but something shifted. Ann-Margret's presence was so strong that it seemed to pull focus. She didn't do it on purpose. She just brought a different energy that couldn't be ignored. There were even moments where Elvis seemed distracted. In some of the fast-paced scenes, he didn't lip-sync as perfectly as usual. Fans watching closely could pick up on it. One theory was that Ann-Margret's performance had affected him. Her energy filled the room and made it hard for anyone else to stand out, even Elvis himself. Ann-Margret wasn't just naturally talented. She had been trained at the Marjorie Young School of Dance. Her background gave her precision, but she didn't let that make her stiff. She mixed sharp technique with a high-energy style. She danced like a storm. When she and Elvis shared the screen, it was hard for her not to take over the scene. She didn't try to outshine him. It just happened. Their chemistry was strong and easy to see, but it also caused trouble. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, wasn't happy. He had spent years building Elvis into the biggest star in the world. He controlled every part of Elvis's image and career. So when someone else began to pull attention away from Elvis, Parker noticed, and he didn't like it. The movie was supposed to be all about Elvis. But Ann-Margret's energy made people talk about her just as much, if not more. It seemed she was becoming the real star. That was a problem for Parker. He was used to having things under control, and this time he felt like he was losing his grip. Most of Parker's anger was directed at George Sidney. He believed Sidney was pushing Ann-Margret too much and giving her too many close-ups. He thought the director was trying to shift the story so that it focused more on her than on Elvis. Parker stepped in. He reminded the producers that the movie had been built around Elvis and his name and image were the most important parts of it. Sidney, who had worked on many films before, didn't back down. He believed Ann-Margret made the movie better. He argued that she helped Elvis look even more exciting. But Parker didn't care about those ideas. He cared about business. He didn't want anyone to take attention away from Elvis, not even someone as talented as Ann-Margret, so the pressure built up. Some scenes were taken out of the movie. These were the scenes that showed more of the relationship between Elvis and Ann-Margret's characters. Cutting them changed the feel of the film. It made the romance seem less central. Officially, the changes were blamed on pacing or time limits, but many people believed Parker was behind it. One duet stayed in the film, "The Lady Loves Me." But even that was all that remained from several songs they had recorded together. The other songs weren't released until long after Elvis had passed. Parker had made the decision to hold them back. He didn't want Ann-Margret to get more attention than necessary. Elvis, too, may have felt uneasy. Some stories say he went to Parker and said he believed Sidney was cutting him out of important moments. Maybe he felt his place slipping. Maybe he thought the spotlight was moving away from him. Still, even with all the backstage drama, something strong had formed between Elvis and Ann-Margret. Their connection wasn't just for the camera. It went beyond the film. There was a real bond there. While others around them argued and made changes, that personal link stayed strong. It was something neither of them could hide. Not in their scenes, not in the way they looked at each other, not in the way they moved together. Fate had brought them together in an incredible way, and there was nothing any of them could do about it. Even after all the cuts, all the tension, and all the behind-the-scenes fights, the final film still carried the spark they had created. That spark didn't fade. It helped make Viva Las Vegas unforgettable. Despite the pressure to dim her light, Ann-Margret's energy still burned through the screen, and Elvis, whether he liked it or not, had shared something real with her, something that couldn't be taken out just by editing. Unfortunately, little did they know that things could get out of hand so fast. The end of the road.
It stopped working for me, and I just stopped.
Elvis and Ann-Margret were deeply drawn to each other, and the connection between them didn't fade. Instead, it grew stronger as they spent more time together and got used to trusting how they felt. This wasn't something made up by movie studios or arranged for publicity. Their bond was real, and it didn't take long for reporters to figure it out. Photos and articles started to spread, and back in Memphis, Priscilla became very upset. Then just a schoolgirl who had recently turned 18, Priscilla lived secretly at Graceland and was out of high school. Elvis tried to explain over the phone that there was nothing serious happening, but no matter what he said, she didn't believe him. She wanted to travel to Los Angeles to see things for herself, but Elvis kept finding reasons to stop her. He had no interest in seeing his world disrupted. He was comfortable with the way things were. In Hollywood, Ann-Margret made him feel happy and alive, while Priscilla waited for him at Graceland. He liked having both women in his life, even though he knew it couldn't last forever. At some point, he would have to make a choice. But Elvis didn't like thinking too far ahead. He preferred to live in the moment. If something bothered him, he would rather get on his Harley, pick up Ann-Margret, and spend the day riding through Los Angeles. That was how he cleared his head. However, one afternoon, things didn't go as planned. He picked Ann-Margret up from MGM Studios, and they hadn't gone far before the motorcycle ran out of gas. They stopped near the corner of Venice and Overland, right next to a gas station. It seemed like perfect luck, except neither of them had any money. Ann-Margret checked her purse but came up empty. They both looked at each other and started laughing. It felt like a small problem in the middle of something bigger. The man at the gas station agreed to fill the tank in exchange for autographs. The next day, Elvis's friend Joe Esposito returned to pay for it properly. Even after filming wrapped on Viva Las Vegas on September 16, Elvis and Ann-Margret kept seeing each other. They were still just as involved as before. Elvis started calling her by little pet names like Rusty, Thumper, Scooby, and Bunny. These weren't just nicknames. They showed how close he felt to her. They didn't think about the future. They just focused on spending time together. Then something happened that made them both feel more aware of how fast things could change. Ann-Margret had traveled to England for the premiere of Viva Las Vegas. There, reporters didn't want to talk about the film as much as they wanted to talk about Elvis. She didn't deny their relationship. She didn't go into details either, but her honesty led to headlines that made it sound like a wedding was right around the corner. News of those stories quickly reached Elvis. Ann-Margret called him to explain that her words had been twisted and that the press made it sound bigger than it was. But by then, trouble was building elsewhere. Priscilla and Elvis were arguing more often. Their fights were louder and more intense. At one point, he even threatened to send her back to Germany. Priscilla told her parents, who were furious. The pressure started closing in on Elvis. The colonel got involved, reminding him of the promises he had made to Priscilla and her family. It was becoming harder for him to ignore the situation. He had reached a point where he couldn't keep both women in his life. Some of the men in his circle believed that Elvis might have picked Ann-Margret if she had chosen to leave show business. But for her, that wasn't an option. She had dreams and plans of her own. She was still young and her career was just starting to bloom. Giving it all up for love felt like too much. The closest they came to marrying was in the final scene of their film. It was shot inside a real wedding chapel in Las Vegas called the Little Church of the West. It looked so convincing that for a moment it felt real, not just for them, but for their fans and the press. Without warning, Elvis cut off contact. He stopped calling her and ignored her calls. Ann-Margret sent him a telegram with the title of one of her songs, "I Just Don't Understand," but he didn't reply. One day she ran into some of Elvis's friends on Sunset Boulevard and asked what had happened. No one could give her an answer. They only said that it was the way Elvis acted at times. Eventually, time passed and they both moved on, at least partly. They stayed close, even if the relationship had changed. They gave each other gifts and supported each other's shows. When Elvis returned to the stage in Las Vegas on July 31, 1969, Ann-Margret was in the audience. They never stopped caring. Their friendship lasted through the years. When Elvis passed away, Ann-Margret went to Memphis for his funeral. She always defended him when people tried to make fun of who he was or what he had done.
There's been so much written that has been negative about him. I wanted to celebrate his life. The man that I knew.
She believed he deserved more respect, and she would know. Few people ever got as close to the real Elvis as she did, a connection that never waned. The story between Ann-Margret and Elvis Presley was shaped by deep feelings, shared experiences, and painful distance. Their bond started with honesty, excitement, and a spark that didn't need to be explained. From the start, it was more than just acting together. They didn't fake the connection. Something real had started to grow between them, something that went beyond the set and the spotlight. But even as it began to grow, something else started to stand in the way. It changed things for Ann-Margret. The presence of Priscilla stayed in the background, always there, even when not spoken about. Ann-Margret knew she was never alone in Elvis's life. She knew his world was already filled with other pressures and people. It wasn't only about another woman. It was about the expectations Elvis had to live with every day. He belonged to more than himself. His name, his face, his moves, they all belonged to something bigger. She never lost her grace. And Elvis, deep down, might have done better with someone strong enough to stand beside him, no matter what. Elvis had to play a role that others wrote for him. RCA, Colonel Parker, and the country itself had claimed him in different ways. His life had turned into a business. He was pulled in many directions, each one louder than the last. Between tour dates, contracts, and public appearances, there was barely any room left for a private life. Love didn't always fit into the schedule. Time didn't wait for feelings to settle. And while the cameras rolled, the feelings between him and Ann-Margret became a mix of real emotion and screen fantasy. They were both passionate performers. On the set of Viva Las Vegas, their energy was sharp and natural. They played off each other with ease. Every move, every glance seemed to mean more than what was written in the script. People around them noticed it. But in Hollywood, real feelings often get twisted and turned into marketing. Their chemistry sold tickets, and the studio didn't hesitate to use it. At times, it felt like their relationship was being reshaped to fit the film. Slowly, things started to feel different between them. Still, the affection stayed. Even as outside pressure started to pull them apart, there was no bitterness in Ann-Margret's heart. She never tried to erase those memories. She never denied how much Elvis had meant to her. She remembered him not with anger, but with warmth. She carried the bond, knowing that love sometimes ends without explanation. Their story didn't reach a happy ending. There was no wedding, no future lived together. But the heartbreak didn't play out with drama. It happened behind the scenes, with choices made without words. Over the years, something special kept showing up. Every time Ann-Margret opened a show, a floral arrangement shaped like a guitar appeared backstage. It was always the same shape, always sent without noise. That gift said what couldn't be said out loud. It showed care, respect, and a lasting connection. It also went against the rules the Colonel tried to set for Elvis. Even though Elvis was being managed and shaped into a perfect public figure, he found small ways to reach out. Through this quiet act, he showed how much he still valued her. During the release of Viva Las Vegas, the real depth of their relationship didn't make the headlines. Most people saw the flirting on screen and assumed it was just part of the film. The real story stayed hidden behind closed doors. The things that happened during rehearsals, the changes in musical numbers, the intense moments between them, all of it was talked about in low voices, not printed in bold letters. It wasn't until years later that people started to piece it together. Through books and interviews, the story came out slowly. The tension between Ann-Margret and Elvis added a spark to the screen that couldn't be faked. Critics who watched it again with fresh eyes noticed that it wasn't just the music or the dancing that made it powerful. It was the feeling that something real was happening between the leads. It wasn't a simple love story. It was layered and real, filled with the kind of emotion that doesn't fade with time. The film took on a new meaning. What many thought was just a fun musical started to be seen as something more. Some say the scenes that were cut could have made the film even stronger. If more of their duets had been left in, or if Ann-Margret had been given more space in the story, maybe things would have changed for both of them. Maybe it would have pushed Elvis's films in a new direction, toward deeper stories and stronger female roles. But those choices were never made. The film stayed as it was, leaving fans and critics to wonder about what was left behind. What remained was the undeniable energy they brought together. The film captured a moment when two stars crossed paths, pushed each other, and made something unforgettable. The performance was just the surface. For those who watched closely, the truth was always there, hidden beneath the bright colors and catchy songs. It lived on in the smallest signs, in backstage flowers, in every flicker of longing that never turned into a public goodbye. And though they went their separate ways, what they shared never fully faded. What are your thoughts on the chemistry between these two stars? Do you think they were meant to be forever? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.